Welcome to the Here's Waldo podcast, where we sit down with top visionaries and creatives in the video game industry. Together, we'll unravel their journeys and learn more about the path they're forging ahead. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hi, I'm Lizzie Mintus, founder and CEO of Here's Waldo Recruiting, a boutique video game recruitment firm. This is the Here's Waldo podcast. In every episode, we dive deep into conversations with creatives, founders, and executives about what it takes to be successful. You can expect to hear valuable lessons from their journey and get a glimpse into the future of the industry. This episode is brought to you by Here's Waldo Recruiting, a boutique recruitment firm specializing in the video game industry that prioritizes quality over quantity and values transparency, communication, and diversity. We partner with companies, creatives, and programmers to understand the why behind their needs and provide white glove experience that ensures a win-win outcome. Today, we have Adam Lieb with us. He is an entrepreneur from Seattle with 20 years of experience building and growing technology companies. He has quite an impressive introduction. He started his first venture building gaming communities when he was 11. He sold his growing website to IGN or News Corp. At 15, he started generating $10,000 a week in virtual goods sales. He built out a marketplace for virtual goods in a popular MMORPG game. When he was 16, he graduated from high school and began studying at the University of Washington. He started and built Gaming Synergies to a multi-million-dollar revenue business operating 25 different properties in the gaming space. Following a childhood dream, he decided to continue running his successful business while he enrolled in law school. He spent 4 years living by the beach in West LA while he learned his JD and MBA, all while continuing to run Game Synergies. Shortly after graduation, Adam founded Duckster, a company focused on building massive communities of obsessed gamers. He went on to raise millions of dollars, recruit a team of passionate developers, and build Duckster out into a major player in the game industry. Adam is now the CEO of Gamesight, which helps developers build, understand, and engage their fan base in order to foster success for the games and bring joy to their gamers. Adam has been recognized by the White House as one of the top entrepreneurs under 30. He regularly speaks to startups and at games conferences, as well as written contributions to publications such as Forbes, entrepreneur.com, and Social Media Today. Let's get started. Thank you so much for being here, Adam. First of all, tell me about your entrepreneurial venture when you were 11. How did you start that? How did you know that you wanted to start something?
Yeah, it's so funny because obviously now I'm a regular adult and the stuff you're reflecting on and, you tell a story, how you tell a story. But at the time, if I had to put myself back in my 11-year-old brain, I never thought that I was starting a business. I never thought that I was an entrepreneur or a founder. Those weren't words that I probably knew or understood. I was really just building a website, which is what I would have called it at the time. If you knew me, I would have said, oh yeah, I'm building a website. And it was a website it was a video game website. Did a couple of different things that kind of were interesting at the time. One was doing tips and tricks, probably what it would have been called back then, but a lot of it were guides and walkthroughs on how to beat games or get to the last level or strategy for how to be successful in games. And I mean, this was AOL internet days. There was information like this on the internet, but there wasn't a lot of it. And there certainly wasn't social media. There wasn't Twitch. There wasn't YouTube. There was no way to kind of learn and watch how someone, beats a game or gets good at a game. So I started writing website content for games that I played and liked. I don't really remember exactly how it started, other than someone must have just asked if send an email to the web admin email address, which is probably the only one that I had at the time, and asked for a guide on a different game that I didn't play or maybe even didn't know what it was. And then now I'm on the internet trying to find someone else who plays those games and understands those games and can write content. And you kind of do that enough that you end up with a lot of content and a bunch of different games and topics. And So I guess it kind of grew organically from there. It was definitely not something I sat down with a business plan and made a cognitive thought of like, this is what I'm going to be doing. It just kind of all happened. It happened out of interest and something that I wanted to do and thought was fun. And then, so IGN bought the website when I was a kid. It wasn't really like, it wasn't like a major M&A, but they bought the website. They didn't, at the time, they were pretty focused on print, like their magazine stuff, not digital. And, it was kind of my first, experience with like, working with a big company. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. Again, funny, I can tell the story now that I was, as an 11-year-old entrepreneur, but I certainly wouldn't have thought that at the time.
So did you stay on when they bought to advise, or was it just a clean transaction?
For like a little bit, I remember getting free games in the mail. Like that was kind of like the big perk was like, get free games and write like kind of reviews on them. It wasn't really something that was me and a friend of mine who was kind of like the other main writer. And I don't know, we were kids. Like it wasn't really like having a job was like not really that interesting, having to report to someone or having to send something in by a certain date. So it didn't, it was more or less, a clean transition. It was kind of a short-lived time where they're like, oh, maybe we can write reviews and guides on, I think they're mostly reviews for like a magazine.
Funny. I love it. And tell us a little bit more about Gamesight. What inspired that? Where did you start? Where are you today?
Yeah, Gamesight is a marketing platform for games. We work with several hundred games, everything from indie AAA to AAA, heavily PC console. We work with games to help them understand where audiences are and grow their playership. A bunch of different kind of tools and services that do that. Some core technology that basically integrates with games as well as all digital, kind of marketing spend. So whether that's, like Facebook and Google and Reddit, Twitch, TikTok, like, TV, all the different places that somebody might be looking to find gamers and tell them about the game they're making, we integrate with all those things as well as like the games to help figure out what is effective, where they should spend their money, how they should grow their games. It's a cool business. We're like 40 people now. Business is like, I guess, sort quasi based in Seattle. We used to be fully based in Seattle. And then, during COVID shutdown went fully remote and have stayed fully remote. We still have maybe a dozen people here in Seattle. So it's a decent hub for us, but it's a ton of fun. Like we get to work with tons of great companies and some of my my favorite studios and favorite games that we get to work on and help them grow their games and sell more copies and make more money. And we do something kind of special and unique that game studios don't generally want to do, like marketing technology and analytics are not, I would say, like core competencies for the vast majority of game studios. They want to build great and fun games, so they do that, and we can do kind of some of this more boring marketing tech, ad tech stuff. And it's a lot of fun to get to work with games that you love and companies that you love and contribute something unique and meaningful to their businesses. I think that's like a childhood dream come true. If I told my 11-year-old self that one day my life was going to be just working with games to help them sell more copies, I'm like, that's cool. Like that's a job. Like I don't know that I would have thought that was a job back then. Certainly that's a big part of my life story as a kid was like loving video games and wanting to sort of be a part of it. But at the time, I don't think gaming was never something that any teacher would have said like, oh yeah, that's a big industry and there's so many jobs in gaming. I mean, the world has changed now. I mean, obviously gaming wasn't as big 25, 30 years ago as it is now. So like, I don't know that they would have been entirely wrong, but at the very least, it was not, sort of commonly understood, games as a $200 billion industry or whatever it is now, where there's, so many jobs and so many careers. And I've got 2 little kids and, for sure they look at that as a very possible life path. Like, oh, I might make a video game when I get older. Or I might do X, Y, or Z in video games. And that's just something that I don't think was obvious to me as a kid or offered to me as a kid, but I sort of was interested in that and wanted that to be a thing. And, fast forward how many years and here we are.
You made it a thing.
Yeah.
Our businesses are kind of similar because we work with so many studios too and get to see the inside scoop. You have such an interesting perspective because you get to see what all the top influencers are doing and what all the companies are doing that makes them so successful. Without giving away any really big secrets, what do you feel like the secret to success there is?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the secret is like the process for most companies. And when you look at the companies that have the most success, it's usually because they are like smart and thoughtful and do something that is, both a combination of creativity and maybe unique creative genius combined with typically like fairly rigid analytics and understanding and of what they're doing. And like, if you can do those things, which are both like each one is uniquely really challenging, being truly data oriented as well as being a sort of like creative genius. Like if you can do both of those things, then nothing else I think really matters. You'll figure everything else out, because whether the trend is cross-platform games, or the trend is VR, or the trend is cloud gaming, or like whatever the various things are, if you can do those other two things, you'll be successful in any of those worlds. You just have to kind of, have the ability to analyze and understand and kind of use the data that is available, with, again, creative genius, which is not like an easy thing to just like, oh, I'll just start being a creative genius tomorrow. But I think those are the two ingredients, and the secret maybe is not so secret. But I would say anyone that ever tells you that like, oh, well, the secret is TikTok, or the secret is X, or like something like that, like it's just not true. I mean, sure, there's flash in the pans and there's random success stories where someone did something weird and it happened to work and they sold a bunch of copies of their game. That's not going to really be like a repeatable success story. Whereas the companies that continue to find ways to be successful, in the kind of the world as it stands now, both like technology, consumer preferences, all of those things, that they can be kind of adaptable. Like those are the companies that are, the forever companies that, are worth billions of dollars and will be worth more than that tomorrow. So, yeah, good luck, I guess. Those are say like really hard things to do. But if those would be I would always focus on the hard things, not the kind of like easy, ethereal things that might come and go.
What company or companies do you feel like are the pinnacle for marketing? Like who really has it down that everybody is admiring right now?
Oh, that's a good question. I think that there's definitely a lot of different kind of like archetypes of what that success looks like. I think, in a lot of ways, there's like companies probably like Scopely that are have really like the science down behind marketing as well as anyone, and they've been able to kind of have pretty close to like, mastery of and success on every game that they publish. And a big part of that, I mean, yeah, making great games is a threshold thing. I don't know a company that is like where you'd be like, wow, they're great at marketing, they just make crappy games. Like, I mean, I suppose that's theoretically possible, but most of what makes marketing successful is you have something great, and marketing is really just the like megaphone to tell a lot of people about the great thing that you made. So making the great game is the first thing, but then I think the kind of like, yeah, data driven analyses, and again, like that kind of creative inspiration around how to message that. I think companies like, yeah, probably Scopely would be the ones that are the pinnacle of it from that perspective. And then you look at like, I think like Blizzard with Diablo 4. I think that's a launch a lot of people look at and go like, wow, it was so amazing, and like, I wish we could do the same thing. And I think in a lot of ways, massive budgets dictate, the size of the game, and the size of the game market that you're producing for will dictate a lot of, what the marketing spend is. You're never going to spend $100 million marketing a game that can only ever sell $100 million worth of units. Whereas you're building a game that you're hoping to do $1 billion. Well, yeah, spending $100 million in marketing is, a perfectly reasonable thing to do. So I think sometimes people kind of conflate the like size and scale of marketing budgets with like, how good they are, but it's a totally different function trying to figure out how to reach 100 million gamers than it is you're making a indie game for a very specific audience, and you're like, okay, well, we need to find all the people on the internet that play this type of game. That's a very different challenge. So I think it's really hard to just kind of compare and go, oh, well, like, Blizzard's Diablo 4 marketing was so awesome, like we should do the same for our game with a $10 million budget. Like the answer is almost certainly not to do that. There's almost no way that will be successful doing, even if you just said, okay, well, let's do everything they did, but we'll just, scale it down to 1/100th the size. Like that just won't work, right? Like a lot of those things only work for games at that scale, marketing budgets at that scale. So I think that is one of the challenging things both about game development and games marketing and distribution, is that you kind of need to match, the specific unique things about your game with how you market it. I mean, there are some games where, my POV is they should spend 100% of their marketing budget on Twitch or YouTube, just getting people to play their game and getting their game in front of people, because the game is awesome, but you kind of need to see it. I think there are a lot of games that you could read about them and they wouldn't sound that interesting, but then you watch people play and you're like, oh, this looks awesome. Making a game like that, that's probably where you should focus. And, there are games that we see where like TikTok ends up being this huge growth vertical for them. There's short clips of their game, people doing funny things, like horror games, actually one of the genres that does like extremely well on TikTok or YouTube Shorts, like basically a short form content where you're watching there's a lot of like reaction videos. It would be like me watching you play a horror game and like you freaking out about something in that, and then me reacting to it. Like that is this like kind of unique phenomenon that happens in horror games that works really well on TikTok. People laugh, watch it for 20 seconds. The person freaks out. They fall out of their chair. They scream, whatever. Ha ha ha. Like, subscribe, next video. That works super well. That's not a like, oh, well, this company does it so well, we should copy their strategy. It's like, well, is this going to work for my game? And, it kind of goes back to your original question, which is like, I think if you're really smart and analytical and you're also really creative, you'll figure those things out uniquely for your game rather than trying to find a blueprint someone else has already created.
So do you do a lot of advising with companies? They'll come in and they say, we have X amount of money and we're thinking about doing X, Y, Z. And then you help them come up with a plan, or they're coming up with a plan and you're analyzing, you're giving them the metrics.
Yeah, I mean, more so the latter. I mean, really, like we're not, and I'm not a, consultant or advisor or anything like that. I mean, we have a platform that should offer that kind of like data and help with that analysis, so that when you are making those decisions, they're informed. I mean, I just sort of said, what I just said is based on a bunch of data that I've seen around horror games and where people discover and play horror games based on. But those are insights that you sort of like can kind of learn for yourself. And that's like kind of my meta point around being, analytical and learning from data. If you're doing all of those things, you'll come up with those insights for your game without, having to rely on one person tell you what, how it's supposed to work.
Yeah. What trends, I mean, did the pandemic really alter the way people think about marketing? I would imagine you're not doing any in person. And then now that the pandemic's over, I think I can say that now, the pandemic's over-ish, as much as it's been so far. How do the in-person events play into things now?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, for sure, things like PAX, right, which were, a big part of, events marketing, show marketing is a big part of the marketing playbook for a lot of game companies for a very long time. And, they kind of all stopped by definition during the pandemic. I would say it's still a little bit like TBD on how all of that shakes out. I mean, E3 didn't happen this year. And part of the reason E3 didn't happen, and this would be more opinion than fact, is that a lot of companies used to spend a lot of money at shows like E3. They know how many copies of their games they sold. They assume that E3 was an important part of that. The pandemic happens. They don't do E3 because it doesn't exist. They still sell roughly the same amount of game units and go, well, we sold the same amount of games, but we didn't spend all the money on E3. Well, why don't we just keep not spending the money on E3 and keep selling the same amount of games? I think there are a lot of companies that basically did that analysis. And I think it's, maybe not wholly dissimilar to like what I'm sure you deal with a lot, which is just kind of like, remote work versus in-person work. And there are a lot of companies that used to spend a ton of money on office space that they assumed you needed to do that in order to like recruit people, retain people, et cetera. And, in the pandemic, if they were still able to recruit, retain, and hire quality talent, well, why have the really expensive office space? Like we're just paying for no reason. So I would say that kind of recoil from in-person events happened. And then there's been like kind of another, I don't know, not backlash, but another like whiplash of companies that go, well, great. Well, now, there's fewer companies that are doing this in-person marketing stuff. So maybe it's a better time for our company that maybe has a smaller budget than, EA and Activision, that maybe we can do a big activation at a show like E3 or PAX or something like that. So I don't think it's fully settled yet as to like whether or not that's going to be a big part of like games marketing going forward. I think almost certainly will be a part of games marketing for some companies, probably forever. There are some games that were better if you can just get people to put their hands on and get people to play that maybe, you can't just with, kind of normal online distribution of games that you really want to get people hands on. especially when you're doing earlier play testing, you're trying to build a community, you're doing early access. Like, yeah, it's, boots on the ground, getting people to put a game in front of them, I think is still a super effective way to, sort of kickstart marketing or start that community building. So I don't think that's gone or going away, but it is definitely changed because of COVID.
Yeah. I feel like a lot more games are going early access, doing a lot of play testing. Is that a pretty big trend that you see? And tell me more, like what other trends are big and what can companies do to stay ahead of the curve?
Definitely that is the idea that a game ships, and the first time anyone plays it or hears about it is when the game ships or 30 days before. I mean, like that's kind of been a relic of the past for a long time. I think early access was a tool phenomenon that kind of like Steam started, and big companies for a long time were sort of like, oh, that's like an indie game thing for people who can't finish their games and they want, they need to get some money for the game that's not finished yet. So they do this early access thing to sell some pre-orders or some early plays. And then what I think companies have started to learn is that you can really build the excitement and hype up for a game by letting, some amount of people play it early, and you can get user feedback if there are problems with the game or things that polishing. You're not going to change the entire game, but more polished little stuff you want to do. I do think that it's become more of a marketing feature than a development feature. I think early access for a long time was about user testing and user feedback, and I think it is now, especially for larger companies, become a little bit more of a thing that they do as part of marketing the game. Let's get people to play our game and say good things about it on the internet earlier. That's more likely to pump up pre-orders, more likely to have early reviews, well perceived, and all of that type of stuff. So I think it has now become a little more of a marketing function than just a pure necessity of game development. And I think it's a good trend. Getting people's hands on games is great. Like all these things, everything's always subject to change. It goes too far and everyone's like, I'm sick of all these games being in beta. And I just, wake me up when the game ships. There is a bit of a sentiment around that. I think, especially for AAAs, where there's a little bit of a, recognition that it is a marketing tactic as opposed to a development tactic. And, at a certain point that goes too far and gamers are like, oh, this sucks. Stop doing it. And then it'll stop. But right now, I think it's probably still a reasonable tactic that I'd say, see fairly frequently. I think the one that I don't call it newest that has worked really well is this early access for, call it 24, 48 hours, say 72 hours before a game launches. If you buy the premium edition, I think Hogwarts Legacy was the game that was the most successful doing this. There were, I don't remember how many, I think 3 versions of the game. It was whatever, 70, 90, and 100 or something like that. And I think the second and third highest SKUs both allowed that early access. And that was super successful. Obviously, it's I shouldn't say obviously, I'm pretty sure it's still the best selling game of the year. If not, it's top 3, but I'm pretty sure it's still the number 1 selling game of the year. And when you do that, I think that there's this kind of unique element of people who just are really excited about the game and love the game and are sort of value the game at $90 or $100 instead of the $60 or $70 price point. And so you kind of give them the opportunity to price segment into where they would prefer to be, which is a higher tier. You give them some more stuff for that, and one of the things is that early access. The other thing that it really does, I definitely did for Hogwarts Legacy, and I actually think we wrote some articles, and there's some decent press around this phenomenon where it also allowed a lot of content creators to start streaming the game, making videos about the game. They bought that, $70, $90 or the $90 version. They could get content up quickly and early. There are a lot of people who maybe were waiting for that, release date, but they got to experience the game and sort of get, figure out if they wanted to buy it or get excited about the game beforehand, because they could watch content creators play it in that 2-day window. So it ended up being, I'll have to pull the date on this, but I'm pretty sure it's still the number 1 most viewed game on Twitch on launch for a single player game. I think it's the number 3 game all time, behind Valorant and something else. But for a single player story driven game, which Hogwarts Legacy was, it was the most kind of successful content creator launch ever. And I think a huge piece of that was that early access period. And you charge people for it. It's 10 or $20 to have access to the game early. So companies are still playing with those different models. I don't know which one will be the winner. There probably won't be one. That'll probably work for a while, and then too many games will do it. People get annoyed with it, and it'll go away.
Yeah, but it worked really well for them. And it's interesting you could sell a game at a higher price point when it's same game. I feel like games have been the same price for such a long time.
No, I mean that's it's funny because that's really not true. This has been a thing for a long time, just in I guess different ways. Like I kept a year check, but I remember buying Halo 3 when Halo 3 came out, and they had 3 versions. They had Halo 3, they had the Heroic Edition, they had the Legendary Edition. Legendary Edition, I think, was 120, base edition was 60, and the Legendary Edition came with the Master Chief helmet, it came with the booklet, a big fancy box, like all of these things. And I don't think that most people like me who bought that game for $120 were like, man, I love this helmet, I'm going to spend $60 on the helmet. Helmet was cool, no doubt, but I don't think that most of us bought it for the helmet. Most of us bought it because we loved Halo so much. We were like, fans, and we wanted to kind of like both support the studio that made the game and also like prove to other people that we were fans. One way to prove you're a fan is you have the fancy edition with all the cool stuff. So I think that has been a thing for a long time. If you think about, the base economic case is for premium games, by and large PC console games for a long time, their challenge with pricing is that there's this sort of like curve of like willingness to pay and how much people value your game and how much people are willing to spend on it. And for Halo 3, they had there were 3 price points under the curve, 60, 90, 120, whatever the 3 were. And that's all they were able to capture, all the value under the curve. Anyone who valued the game at one of those 3 price points would pay those price points, and that's it. What like free-to-play gaming has done, heavily in mobile, obviously exists elsewhere, but like what free-to-play gaming by and large does is captures every single player's willingness to pay under that price point curve. So no matter where you are, whether you want to spend $1 a month, you want to buy a season pass for $10 a month, or you want to buy every single cosmetic thing up to the moon for $50,000 a month, you can do that. That entire curve is like fully represented. So it's been obviously much more successful way of monetizing games than games have been monetized for the last 35 years, but it doesn't work for everyone, obviously. So I think that is something that Hogwarts Legacy, for example, are playing with, rather than just selling the game at that $70 price point. You only get people who are willing to pay exactly that amount. They're able to capture a couple different, they're able to price discriminate a little bit based on a few different things. So definitely smart, good pricing strategy. WB is a big company. They have probably people with pricing strategy in their job title that think about this stuff and do lots of user research and make these decisions.
So you talked about super successful marketing campaigns, but only working to a certain point where people get sick of it and want something new. Do you feel like there are marketing campaigns that do really well? Like short term, they make a lot of money, but then longer term, they end up offending the user base or end up churning people a lot, even though there is money short term, just not long term. Do you see them backfire?
No, not. I mean, I don't know that I would say it's anything backfires like that. I do think like tactics work for a period of time, and then eventually they don't. I mean, that's pretty much true with probably anything, but definitely with marketing, is that stuff works for a while and then it stops working. Some of that is competitive forces. If it works, everyone else does it. It drives the price up. Most of these things are, to some extent, auction-based markets. Even TV ads. If no one wanted to advertise on TV, it'd be really cheap, and the few companies that did would probably be super successful. Then a bunch of other companies come in. They also want to advertise on TV. It drives up the price, and all of a sudden, the effectiveness of that has gone way, way, way down. That happens pretty much everywhere. One of the, if you kind of look at the most successful game companies of all times, most of them rode some particular strategy that they were like either first or best at for quite a while. Eventually, everyone copies it, and kind of doesn't work as well anymore. But companies like Supercell. I mean, Supercell is one of the first. They weren't the first, but they were one of the first companies to really figure out in-game ads, playable ads, video ads, rewarded ads, performance marketing ads on mobile. And there was like, in the heyday, they were spending like $5 million a day on ads on phones to get people to play Clash of Clans. And the game was so great and people loved it so much and they spent so much money in it that they could spend $5 million a day on ads and still make money. They figured that out. Eventually, a bunch of other companies copied them. They moved in, they started doing the same thing. the cost of all of those ads went way up. It was no longer effective to do it. They slowed down or stopped doing it. I think Roblox by and large was a huge successful publicly traded company now. By and large was like on the back of partnering with lots and lots of YouTubers. And the way that most people discovered Roblox was watching a YouTuber play it. That was a tactic that worked for them. Sure, eventually a bunch of other companies all try to contract those same Roblox creators, and the cost of those videos goes way up. It's maybe not an effective tactic for everyone anymore. So, being early on something and then also like being right. You think about like these are people probably don't like these details, but Zynga was so successful because they were on Facebook and they were able to take advantage of the systems in place where everyone was sending you a notification 100 times a day to water their crops in Farmville. It's a joke, it's a meme, but it worked because we all know it and we can all reference it because it was such a pervasive part of and being an internet user for 3 or 4 years. Grew them to a publicly traded company and worth whatever $10 billion at some point. So yeah, it doesn't work anymore. A bunch of other companies did it. Eventually, everyone hated it. Everyone blocked all the notifications. Facebook shut it down. That stopped being an effective marketing tactic. But for a while, it was the best marketing tactic in the world. And I think that's back to our first discussion, which is like, yeah, if you're smart and you're creative, you're going to figure those things out and what works for your game and what doesn't. And if you're on the back end of the curve of where something is working, you got to figure out how to stop it quickly and find a new thing, or you're going to be the one that's sending all the notifications on Facebook that no one sees. And that was not a good place to be. And there were a lot of game developers that were chasing that Zynga thing and like, hey, we've got, a game that's like Farmville, but better. Well, great. But anyone to play it. That could have been true. There probably, almost certainly there were games that were better games than Mafia Wars or Farmville or whatever, but that were never able to get tens of millions of people to play them. And, that's a big part of making games successful is not just making a great game, but getting a lot of people to buy it or play it.
Yeah. Right time too. I feel like place, right time, right tactics. Talk to me about influencer marketing. What makes an influencer the right influencer for your game?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think that influencer marketing is kind of like what we were just talking about. Like right now, one of the most effective, most important tactics to distribute games. I think that many, not most, but certainly many gamers decide what games they play based on watching other people play them. And that's, what we broadly call influencer marketing. That's you're watching a Twitch streamer or a YouTuber or TikToker who's talking about or playing a game. Those become, in a lot of ways, the kind of trusted reviews that, review sites used to be, or magazines. And sadly, in my day used to be where that was, you read the reviews and what did critics say? Well, what's better than a critic who you don't know? Well, someone who you feel like that you can watch, and not only do you get to hear their opinion of what they think of the game, you literally get to watch them play it and make the determination for yourself. Like, does this game look fun? Maybe a streamer who I love likes it, but like, it looks lame to me. Well, then I'm not going to buy it. So it really gives you that, probably the best, try before you buy experience short of playing it for yourself. And I think even if for a lot of games that, do things like free trials and, try before you buy stuff, watching someone else play it is sometimes a better experience because you don't have to take all of it. It's like less work. It's more passive. It's easier to just sit back and watch someone play or watch multiple people play. And I think that's a big part of the purchase decision journey for many, many, many players is watching multiple content creators play a game and making, again, that determination whether they think that they'd like it. So hugely important. I don't think, maybe with some rare exceptions, like you should be thinking about launching a game without having a really robust, content creator strategy, influencer strategy for how you're going to work with creators, how you're going to make a game that is fun to watch, not just play. Certainly that's not required, but if you look at most of the most successful games today, so at least off mobile, they're all games that do really well on Twitch and YouTube. And that's because the games aren't just fun to play, but they're fun to watch. That's just part of the world we live in today. And so, I certainly think it's one worth embracing.
And there's a content creator platform that you partner closely with, right?
We work with all the platforms. Twitch, YouTube, and TikTok are the three biggest. There are many, 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 many smaller ones. Those three are the biggest by a lot. you can slice and dice in different ways. I think TikTok generates the most views, but they're more minimal views, right? They're, someone scrolls and sees something for 2 seconds, it's a view, but it's like not as impactful. YouTube, more dedicated videos, longer watch times, fewer viewers. And then Twitch, like smallest number of viewers in terms of like actual unique people who watch something, but the highest form of engagement. Again, if you watch someone play a brand new game, you watch them stream it for an hour. At the end of that hour, you should have enough context to make your purchase decision, whether you think this game is great and you want to buy it or not. Maybe you buy it, maybe you wishlist it, or maybe you decide, hey, this game sucks, I don't want to play it. That's fine too. But that engagement experience on a smaller number is worth a whole lot more. So yeah, we work with all those platforms. They all, every game is a little different in terms of which platforms they're going to work best on, what type of content their game can kind of generate. There's certain games that are fun to watch clips of, but maybe you don't want to watch someone play it for an hour straight. Maybe it's boring and for a long sit, but it's great for those highlights. And there are other games where watching the full match and watching a 40-minute session is what's fun, either suspense or build up or whatever the things are. So yeah, all those platforms I would say are valuable and useful, but for different reasons.
And do you feel like people need a creative genius to determine what platform is going to work best for their game? Or like you said, horror games do really well on short form. Are there some like hard and fast rules that people generally follow?
No, I think that is more, it is more dynamic. I mean, like that one I would say is closer to a hard and fast rule, but for most games there are, they're all just kind of like shades of gray. There are very few games or game genres that like only work on platform, on YouTube, and don't work at all on Twitch. Like that's pretty rare. Usually it's gradients, but when you have finite resources, you need to determine where you're going to put your time and resources and money. And so yeah, I would say that's more data than not. But I think whether the games are successful on those platforms often are like that. That's a lot of that is game development, and that's what type of game you're building and how you can make it successful on those platforms. I mean, simplest example of all is things like spectator mode. There are some games where just watching the creator's POV in the game may not be the best sort of like streaming or YouTube experience, right? You might want to like cut out a bunch of their UI so you can just focus on the gameplay plus like, I don't know, the match stats, but you don't need all of their UI that the player might use. So having a mode where it's basically a streamer can stream, where the viewers get a spectator mode is sometimes really valuable. There's games that doesn't matter for, there's games that it does. But I would say those are the types of things where sometimes there is, kind of, the creative genius around, well, how can we make sure that this game is fun to watch? And that's beyond my scope of anything I could sort of give even like good examples on how I would even go about doing that. But there are some games that have done that extremely well and have been really successful. And then there's games that don't. I mean, if you really think about the most successful games, many of the most successful games in the last 5 years on Twitch have been battle royales like PUBG and Fortnite. And one of the reasons those games have been so successful in the world is because they're fun to watch. There's the sort of like combination of like short-ish game sessions, the build up to like this kind of like, climax of a match where, you start as one of 100 and then like, every minute you go, people are dropping off and like it gets more and more entertaining and more fun to watch over time to the moment of like, winner, chicken dinner or whatever it is really fun to watch. Like that was, genius of the game design to make that like suspenseful viewership watching, as opposed to another shooter that has a first to 50 kills and just doesn't quite have the same POV build up from an individual content creator. So like there are things that you can do in game development, of course, that makes your game more fun to be viewable, and that matters a lot. But in terms of what platforms you're going to want to like focus on, that I would say is more so a science decision, not an art decision.
Yeah, that makes sense. Can you tell us your biggest success story for Gamesight? Is there one company, feel free to anonymize, is just really, I don't know, kind of had a turning point given all of the data?
Ooh, yeah, that's a tough one. I don't know that there is a turning point. I mean, I think it's like, it's like a lot of these things, like, at some point you wake up and you say, oh, it's like an overnight success story, but like at what point did that happen? What point in the years and years and years did that happen? I'm not sure. I think that in terms of like, I don't know, like personal success, like for me, which I will anonymize. There's a company we work with and large AAA developer, been making games for a really, really long time. Uh, Lots of really successful games, billions of dollars in revenue for their games and IPs. And they were, I would say, like super old school with how they kind of did marketing and viewed marketing. They were not data driven. They were very much the like, art over science type folks. And what ended up happening was they kind of had a new team leader who came in with a different perspective, way more like kind of, the science over art or data over, brand, if you will. And that person kind of took a different turn. We started working with them. It took at least a year and a half for this person to kind of like turn over the marketing department and team to more of their way of thinking. And a huge part of that I know was partnering with us and using our technology to change how they think about and make decisions. And they were more successful than they've ever been. Already very successful, even more successful. And I mean, that's awesome. It's fun to be a part of like a huge kind of turnaround, and especially something that already was a success to go, wow, we only thought we could sell this many copies and now we're selling this many copies, and we're kind of doing all these different tactics that we had never done or never thought about doing. We stopped doing some things that were, not effective or, waste of money. And now we're doing all these other things that are super effective. We have, larger budgets and more success. And, now it's been a few years and like, they're doing a lot more projects now. They're spending a lot more money. They're making a lot more money. Like all of those things are great. And, certainly not trying to take credit for any of that, but being a part of that journey to that kind of like success story has been great. Yeah, that's definitely been a super, super rewarding thing when you look at the actual raw numbers and, how many zeros are behind those things. You're like, wow, well, like we were able to help with that. It's pretty cool. So yeah, I would say that's probably it. Maybe lame without names, but if they're good reason, unfortunately can't share that.
No, that is rewarding. And that's great. That's sort of why I do what I do too. You get to be a little part of it. You get to find that person that makes that killer feature and the game's so successful. And for you, it's tactics and data.
Yeah, that's right. And I mean, I think, no matter who you are, I mean, when you're talking about these giant games that thousands of people work on, there is no one person that's, ever going to be, anyone is just a small part of the overall success story. And there isn't a single person, even the game director, that's, kind of like the person that's responsible for it. It takes a lot of people. I mean, these are, I think it's easy for us to forget we're in the weeds of it, just like how big it is. And, right. Games bigger than movies, TV, sports, like it's the biggest, form of entertainment in the world. And to, be a part of some of the largest success stories. Yeah. It's a Herculean effort that obviously takes lots of years and lots of people. And yeah, it's fun to be a part of that. Personally enjoy that I get to be a part of it. Like, at the end, more towards the end, I'm not there for the 5 years of like early stage development where there's, no playable builds and, it's a lot of whiteboarding and tons of development, but not, anything close to a finished product. I get to mostly work on stuff closer to finished product. So it's a faster feedback cycle from when we'll usually start working on something to when it's launched and generating revenue.
Yeah, that makes sense. How did you figure out this need in the market for your business in general?
Yeah, I was working on a different project and different product, and a partner of ours, a customer game studio, on this other project, basically flagged this as a need. Or they're like, hey, we're spending money, we're doing this stuff on TikTok, or sorry, TikTok, it was Facebook at the time. I don't know why TikTok stuck in my head. We're doing this stuff on Facebook, and we'd love to know if it's successful. Our Facebook rep tells us we need to do X, Y, and Z, but it's not working. Any ideas? And that's really kind of how Robert and I kind of, I'd say, stumbled into it, because we definitely did not set out to build like, marketing technology tools for game studios. Was not really like the thought, but that was clearly a need from one developer and one marketer at one studio. We kind of worked with him on it, and it worked out, was successful. And he says, he's like, yeah, I think like a lot of other studios will need the same thing. It didn't take us long to kind of figure out that he was right, and that there were lots of other studios that needed the same thing. So yeah, it was born out of basically a customer of another business, and it's now a future customer and current customer of ours. It's kind of like, I would say, random suggestion. I don't think it was like a super well thought out thing. It was sort of like, hey, yeah, this is like kind of annoying that we don't have any visibility here. And we don't really know if our Facebook budget is like selling any copies of our game. Could you help us figure out if it is? And we were able to help figure it out. And it made a business difference to him, and has for a bunch of games he's worked on since. So that's also, I don't know, maybe that would have been my second answer to, kind of biggest win was, that person who we worked with on that first studio. We've now worked with him across he's worked at 3 companies since then, and we've worked with him at every studio. So that's always a fun level of continuity.
Yeah, games are fun because everyone works at the same studio. Well, you worked with at one studio, come over to another, and just a big community.
Yeah, it's a small industry, I guess, small world.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you wish you knew when you started? You've had 3 businesses. So either you started your first business when you were 11, so I'm sure you wish you knew a lot then. But what are the biggest lessons along the way that you would share for somebody has their own business or is thinking about starting?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'd say I get asked this question a lot, and I think I probably have the same answer every time. Hopefully I can say it clearly, which is I think that the most important thing as a founder is trusting your own like gut or trusting your own judgment. And that is, I think, way harder to do than it sounds like. I think it's especially hard when you are young or inexperienced at like the specific thing you're doing, because, as like a reasonably smart person, you're like, well, I don't really know that much about this. Let me like trust someone who does. And I think that the inclination to ask questions and learn from other people is really great. But I think at the end of the day, it still needs to be you that makes the decision. And every single one of the biggest like mistakes I can point to in my career where I'm like, wow, I really screwed this up, and there was like, major consequences for it. All of them have been something where I had an instinct or judgment to do something and I didn't do it. I trusted someone else, an investor, an advisor, and like these are all like, well-intentioned people that were trying to help me. There wasn't like they were like, giving me objectively bad advice, but it was like maybe good advice for them, not good advice for me. And I think when if you put it it'll sound lame, but you put it in a matrix and you imagine there's 4 boxes where you like trust your own judgment and make the right decision, don't trust your judgment and make the wrong decision. Like you kind of look at all the different outcomes, and if you trust your own judgment and make the right choice, like obviously that's great. You've reinforced that you know what you're doing and that you should keep doing those things. If you trust your judgment and make the wrong decision, which is sort of the thing I guess like you'd be afraid of doing, you're going to learn. And I think that that's kind of the challenge of when you don't trust your judgment and then you do what someone else says you should do, and then you just go ahead and do that, and then it ends up being wrong. Like there's not really a lot to learn from that. You're like, well, I guess don't listen to that guy again. But oftentimes it's not that person who's like their input wasn't wrong. You just kind of like applied it incorrectly. And so I think that would be mine, is really like trusting your judgment, and then like getting good at figuring out how to listen to yourself, because it's not always easy to do. I would say that happens to me a lot, where like something comes and I'm like, I don't really know how I feel about this. I need to take some time and actively think about how I feel or think about a certain issue before I take action. And when I think about employees, investors, partners, like one of the reasons like people work here is like they trust my judgment. One of the reasons people like invested in my companies and give me money is because they trust my judgment. One of the reasons customers work with us is hopefully they trust the leadership's judgment that we're building the right products and all those things. So a lot of people have kind of like already put their faith in my judgment. So by me like not doing that, I'm kind of doing them a disservice. So I would say that's my biggest piece of advice. And I know it can be a hard thing to do, but at the end of the day, I think it's extremely important to be willing to trust your own instincts and, be prepared to be wrong and, own up to that and learn from it and don't do the same thing again. But when you just let someone else make a decision for you, then you're really not going to ever get any better.
That's really true. Everyone's advice is always to trust your gut, which is funny and hard to quantify. If you have to make a decision and you're a little bit torn and you're marinating on it, what do you do to decide? Do you make a list, talk to other people, ask for experiences, go on a walk?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it depends. Definitely depends on like the type of thing. I definitely ask people. I ask people. I read stuff. I would say one of the things I think I'm pretty good at doing is, rather than just like asking people, because I think it's hard to get, especially hard decisions, like they're complex. There's like a lot of variables. There's a lot of factors. It's pretty much impossible to give someone else all the context that you have in your head to make the decision. So what I find is a little bit more useful is like, I'll kind of come up with like a hypothesis of like, okay, well, I think this is what I'm going to do. Or sometimes I think it's like, maybe this is the wrong answer, but what if it was the right answer? And I'll present that to people who I trust as though that's what I'm going to do. And then I kind of gauge people's feedback. Right. So, it's hard. We're using this like example in the abstract, but I don't know, let's just imagine like, I was deciding between two, C-level hires, and like they're really different people with really different backgrounds, and, kind of be a different direction for the company based on who we picked. And I'm like really torn between the two. What I probably would do is I would, pick candidate A, and then I would tell, I don't know who, I have a CEO coach. I tell my CEO coach, hey, Peter, I think I'm really thinking, that we're going to go with candidate A. Here are all the reasons why I think candidate A is going to be better. And then as I talk it out, and then as I hear him react, that will really help inform my decision. I think that I get way better feedback when I do that versus if I just say, hey, Peter, I got candidate A, candidate B, pros, cons. What do you think? I mean, he could probably give me a decent answer, but I think he'll give me a way better feedback if I told him why I want to hire candidate A. And, maybe he's like, yeah, those are all really good reasons, Adam, you should definitely do that. Or he's like, oh yeah, but what about this? Have you really thought about this? And then, maybe that's a more valuable conversation. So definitely talk to people. And my own personal thing is to kind of, pick a side. I guess like, I have a lawyer background, so I guess I have a little bit of that, like, pick a side of the argument and then argue for it. And, you can change it later. It doesn't, you don't have to stick with it just because you argued for it one time. So yeah, that's probably what I do. I take walks. I live in the woods. I like to take walks in the woods. That's something I do to think about problems. But when I'm down to, close to an answer, that's probably what I do is I pick a side, and I would try to convince people that that's what to do. And I usually will convince myself during that time that I want to do that, or I don't want to do that.
That's great advice.
Maybe. I don't know if it worked for other people. It just was my process. I'm not sure that it's like, a magic trick or anything.
Well, you didn't tell me to do it. You just told me what works for you. So
sure. Yeah. Maybe I'm not. Yeah, definitely. If it works for you, do it.
Yeah. Thank you. I have one last question for you. Let's pretend we're at an awards ceremony and you're getting a big award for a lifetime achievement for everything you've done up until this point. Who are you going to thank?
Ooh, I don't know. Like, is there an answer different than like, you thank your mom first? You always thank your mom first.
Oh,
I mean, maybe not. Maybe I should. I would probably go mom first. You probably go chronologically. I'd probably go mom, and then maybe not fully chronological, but then like, family, like wife, kids. Then it's like, team members, like people who I work with, customers, partners, like, maybe investors. Investors probably go last, but they're on there somewhere too. So I think it would be that. I don't know how many people would get like a by name shout out other than like mom and wife and kids. Everything else is pretty much like, the class of people, probably maybe Robert specifically, who's our CTO, my business partner. He probably get a personal shout out. Everyone else, maybe more of like a team, but I suppose it also depends on the award. Maybe if there's more specifics why someone else would get a shout out, but yeah, that would be my answer. Mom, wife, kids, team members, customers.
and Robert is somebody that you started. This is your second business with Robert. So Robert's the yin to your yang.
Yeah. Robert and I've worked together 2011. So whatever that is, 12 years now. So, yeah, Robert and I started working together. Robert was 16. He was in high school, and he's an engineer, but he was, a software developer, I guess. At 16, we worked together on a project, and, we've worked together ever since. So yeah, it's been a long ride with him.
How did you find each other? That's amazing. I feel like it's so hard to find someone that you jive with like that.
The internet. I mean, that's, we were, I was working on a project, and he was working on a different project. And I was like, hey, you should work on my project with me. It's kind of has some similarities to some stuff you're doing. And, I think your code is really good, and I think you'd be, helpful to this project. And, I don't know. He was like, oh, sure, I guess I could do that. And we did. And I mean, I don't know. I wouldn't say that it was something where we like, first, met and clicked. Like, I think it was, we worked together, and like he was, worked on this thing and had some synergies, and it kind of worked together. And then over time, got to know each other more, and to the point, now we're partners now, and yeah, so it is weird, and it is random, and it was not, I don't know, all that well thought out. It was more just kind of like happenstance how it all worked out. But No, Robert's tremendous. The best engineer I've ever worked with or known, and he's a great guy and great partner and teammate, great manager, great leader for the engineering team, and overall smart dude. So he'd get in there somewhere.
I think he deserves a shout out. That's really sweet to hear. But you kind of headhunted him. Basically, you recruited him, it sounds like.
Yeah. I mean, he was like, from his own high school or whatever. Like, I don't think he wasn't like he had like a lot of other job offers because he was, a high schooler. But yeah, he was building something. I mean, he was building this like, really awesome community tools that a lot of gaming communities were using. And I had no idea he was like 16. It's like, you just know people's like online handles and like GitHub usernames or whatever. It's not exactly like there was, anything more to that for a while. Like at some point you figure those things out. You talk to each other and you get to know each other. But for a while, I was like, oh, this guy writes this, has this great app and a lot of people seem to use it. And he has like a good POV on how to do this one thing. So like maybe he should be, working on this project with us. So I will say that I have definitely had a lot of success with, I don't know, headhunting is quite the word I would use, but where you basically, especially on the development side, you find somebody who's built something that that you specifically like and are a fan of. I think it's an easier thing to recruit someone to be like, hey, I'm a huge fan of this project that you've done. Here's why, and here's the project I'm working on and why you should work on it with me. That works out really well. I mean, people obviously want to work on if they're well, I guess they liked the last thing they did, they'll be interested in your thing if they are similar in some kind of way. But yeah, I've done that multiple times now to like, I don't know, pretty decent success, I would say.
You're giving away my recruiting secret.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so people
that's good. I mean, personally reach out, see what they worked on, recognize it, have used it. I mean, of course they're going to reply to you. So
I mean, I would think so. Yeah.
That's flattering.
Yeah. Most people like to talk about the stuff that they've done. Yeah. I mean, I suppose you could go the other way. Like, yeah, I worked on that project. I hated it. It sucked. I hated everything about it. Okay, fine. Well, but if that's true, then they don't want to work with you. You don't want to work with them. So it like kind of nets out to be the right answer anyway.
Yeah, that's true. But I think today it's just so much ChatGPT. Like, I am impressed with your background. I have an opportunity that's great, So
no. And I mean, maybe that works 1 out of 10,000 times and it costs nothing to do that. So, maybe that is an effective strategy. But I think for most of us, I mean, that's probably the number one. I just did a panel at Seattle Tech Week last week, and some, I don't know, like fresh college graduate, I think, came up and he was asking about getting a job in games. And he's like, what's your tip for getting a job in games? And it was that, which is like, if you want to work at a game studio, like you better have like played the game and you better be able to talk like about why you're interested in working at their company. The worst thing you can do is like, hey, I want a job in games. You're a game company, hire me. It's like, well, but why do you want to work at my game company, not just like any games company? And that I'm sure the best, I'm sure because we had 17,000 job applicants last year to work at Gamesight, and the vast majority of them are like, by and large, dear company, I want a job. You have a job. Please give me a job. And it's like, well, everyone wants to hear why you want this specific job at this specific company, not just a job in general. And being able to articulate that, I think it's supposed to be a harder skill than I think it is because not that many people do it.
Well, don't do it. No, we talked about this the other day for the cover letter. It's like, dear first name, I am interested in your job.
Tell me more. No, and you don't know me. You don't have to pretend you know me or care about me. That's fine. But at the very least, you could like read the description of the on the website, or hopefully we do a good job in our job job descriptions that kind of say what the job is, and you should be able to read it and go, oh yeah, this is like the kind of thing I do perfect at. I love doing XYZ. And a lot of our jobs now, like they'll have specifics around like types of games and game companies. Like, do you want to work on first-person shooter games? Well, like, if the answer, if you can't in a cover letter say yes to that, well, you're probably not a good fit for this job.
Totally. That's basic things that are not rocket science that you would think would be more common, but they're not. So, but yes. At least then it's kind of easier to pick who you want. We had a job we had open for a week to work for Here's Waldo, and we had over 500 applicants, and we had to shut it down. I think people that made it to we had one person make it to finals out of those 500 applicants.
Did you hire them?
No. So wild. Yeah. I've heard that a lot. I mean, we had so many applicants, and for us, we spent so much time going through them too. But then in the end, we recruited for ourselves. And that was more effective. So yeah, it is. I mean, it is crazy. Like just the numbers of, you look at 500 applicants and like how many of them are, I mean, forget about qualified, but like how many of them can like,
get through like first blush cover letter type thing. Like it's like not that many, right? Like you weed out the vast majority in that first step of like, this is a massive typo in the cover letter. I don't know if I sent you one of my favorites that I got flagged to me recently. It was someone said that they were in their cover letter extremely detail oriented and they spelled detailed wrong. And it was like, if it was a joke, it was hilarious. If it wasn't a joke, it's not hilarious. Like, oh, don't do that.
Please. Yeah, that is amazing. There are a lot of good applicants. It's always entertaining. For sure.
Yes, I think I might have told you that at lunch. I think you should start like a TikTok of those. You have to blur the names. You're not trying to embarrass people, but there's probably some pretty good fails. We actually just started a new channel in our company Slack called, what did they actually call it? Like America's Best Outreach Email Fails. And they're all just like, most of them are recruiters, tech recruiters, various sales enablement tools, like, the stuff you'd expect. And there's so many funny ones.
Okay, if you could Slack me those, that would be great. Somebody offered me to feed a hungry dog a bowl of dog food if I took a call with them. And my friend Kelly.
What if you don't?
I guess the dog's gonna starve.
Yeah, see, now that's like.
Should I ask them? My friend Kelly Barsh.
Is this a threat?
I don't know. And she's like, people keep offering me Yeti mugs, and I keep getting this too. So what is the strategy? I feel like there's an overarching sales enablement tool strategy conference, and they're like, hey, that was Yeti mugs.
Well, maybe Yeti's sales team is just killing it. I did that once. I did it for, and I won't say who it was, but I did it for a big tech product thing where they did like they did the bribe in email, and it was like a Nintendo Switch, and I was like, I'll take a 30-minute call for a Nintendo Switch, and then I think I don't remember if I raffled it off at work. We give it to I didn't keep it. I gave it to someone else at the company, but I was like, I'll do it for that. But they were kind of like difficult to get the Switch out of after the call. Like, oh yeah, it's coming. I was like, well, you don't have my address, so like it can't be on the way. Like, when am I going to get it? And then they kept trying to book a second call. I'm like, well, like, I just want to make sure you guys are truthful before I'm not going to work with a vendor that's not even truthful. So, but they gave me my Switch eventually. So, good for them.
Love it. Yeah. Please send me some of those. Okay. We've been talking to Adam Lieb, who's the founder of Gamesight. Adam, where can people go to learn more about you? Maybe apply to work at Gamesight with an appropriate cover letter?
The appropriate cover letter. Let's see. So I would say for me, Twitter is the best. It is at Adam S. Lieb on Twitter. You can go to the company website, Gamesight, GAMESIGHT.io. If you go there, there's a career page on there. It's linked to kind of the platform we use to manage all that. I think our careers page kind of talks about why to work at the company and all that stuff, as well as the job portal where people can apply. And we do 100% of our sourcing through that tool.
Perfect. Thank you so much. It was fun.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening to the show this week. To catch all the latest from Here's Waldo, you can follow us on LinkedIn. Be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes. We'll see you next time.